quite a minute since I've made any kind of video. This is going to be part of my presentation series. This is going to be part 1 of the series. I'm not actually completely done with this series yet, but I have enough to start with my first couple of videos. So here we go. Heliocentrism and the Luciferian Scientific Dictatorship. Pythagoras, Euclid, Plato, Democritus, Aristotle, Aristarchus, Archimedes. I don't know how to pronounce half of this stuff, obviously, so I don't care. Aristophanes, Hipparchus, Ptolemy, Philo, Gnosticism, Saros, Alberuni, Copernicus, Riccioli, Tycho Brahe, Kepler, Galileo, Newton, Bessel, the popes, the Council of Trent, the Jesuits, Freemasonry, Lunar Society, the Royal Society, Darwinism, spontaneous generation, the Big Bang, gravity, Cavendish, centrifugal force, dinosaurs, Airy, Michelson, Morley, Sagnac, Einstein, relativity, NASA, Hubble, military operations, Antarctic Treaty, Jack Parsons, Von Braun, OTO, and Crowley, faking space, moon landing, so-called, Operation Paperclip, and Fritz Lang. Gnosticism. After gnosis, the Greek word for knowledge or insight, is the name given to loosely organized religious and philosophical movement that flourished in the 1st and 2nd centuries CE. It is possible to locate influences or sources as far back as the 2nd and 1st centuries BCE, such as the early treatises of the Corpus Hermeticum, the Jewish apocalyptic writings, and especially Platonic philosophy and the Hebrew scriptures themselves. There is a supreme power that, and this is their beliefs, that there is a supreme power that is invisible, that has no perceptible form, claimed by the various religious teachers and religions, all contained a hidden kernel of initiation. This secret could only be acquired through exercise in the mind and body until it can be made as a vessel. They believe that a superior god, Lucifer, freed them from the bonds of ignorance through intellect and given esoteric knowledge to become gods. So it's like the Promethean story, archetype. Considered Christians heretics and Jews who were trying to undermine Christianity to be remnants of the Persian sun worshippers of the 3rd century. Believed man was held prisoner in the Garden of Eden by an unjust, vindictive, and very cruel God. Believe our superior divine spirits are inside an imperfect body made by an imperfect God. Move that. Sophia, meaning wisdom in Greek. Asherah, Semiramis of Babylon. Isis of Egypt. Mary of the Catholics. Columbia of the Americas. Bavaria of Germany. Guadalupe of Mexico. It's the same archetypal figure, right? Deity, representing something. So as you can see, these are the different deities, archetypes. I'm not going to go deep into that because this is not a theological thing or a religious thing or a deity thing. I'm going to do a separate deity thing. Abraxas, the male deity who dwells with Sophia. Kabbalistic computation 365. They had no god or idol, but this figure just represented the body of man himself. The tunic representing the struggle for socialism. The shield representing wisdom. The snakes representing nous, insight, logos, understanding. And I'm just laying down a little bit of groundwork about Gnosticism in general, because in my opinion, you cannot separate Gnosticism from the globli. So high priestesses were initiated with sex magic rituals. So, quote, within the 4th path, which is the path to the astute man, we live practically in the most complete equilibrium. We study alchemy and Kabbalah. They saw Jesus as, and that's a Gnostic for you. They saw Jesus as the serpent, further spreading esoteric knowledge. The cross symbol was covered with a serpent. Man comes to full power from activating mind and struggle to arrive at gnosis, being the Superman. And they borrowed the illustrations from all religions. All right. They believe individuals who are more enlightened are more important. Believe in magic. Influenced Europe up through the Middle Ages. They had many gems or inscribed stones decorated with serpents, Kabbalistic names, and the rest. User initiation, talismans, and invocations. Agnostic. So the original meaning of agnostic we're not talking about the modern meaning where it's like someone who's just indifferent to whether God exists or not, or just doesn't know or doesn't have a positive claim. What it used to mean is, so the Gnostics actually, once the Christian, once that movement began and started to spread like wildfire, the Gnostics tried to snuff it out by infiltrating it with Gnostic teachings. Those early on Christians wholeheartedly rejected it. It did not work. So the Gnostics had to go back to the drawing board and try a different approach. And the approach they came up with, they end up creating something called the Catholic Church and a form of sacerdotalism. And what they did was they embedded esoteric gems from their Gnostic dogma into the Catholic Church to infiltrate the Christians that way. Because when they blunt force tried to con them, they weren't going for it. They had to go back to the drawing board and create the Catholic Church. So what are they? The surround and kill the Constantines, and then what is it? Emperor Julian that tries to set up and build the third temple of Jerusalem. That doesn't sound like Christian dogma to me. So anyway, that when you're looking at agnostic, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about those early on Christians who actually rejected the Gnostic teachings. Excuse me. I'm gonna cough for a second. Alrighty, moving on. The Cainites, a Gnostic sect called to destroy things of this earth, and God is the destroyer. Other branches in the Middle East and Western Europe followed the doctrines of Valentinus. This school taught its initiates that matter is more evil than good, and man must be purified by mental concentration. Also, after death, man will rejoin that from which he has been severed, and with those whom he loved. In the end, they believe all matter will eventually be destroyed by fire. The Mandeans in Iraq follow ancient Gnosticism, practicing initiation, ecstasy, rituals, strike links similar to Freemasonic ones. And of course, they become Freemasons. Gnostic, Kabbalistic Freemasons. That is the core. All right. His followers were concentrated in the southern Italy town of Croton and remained active as a group from approximately the year 530 through the 4th century BCE. In general, they tended to divide themselves into mystics on one hand and mathematicians on the other. Sounds very familiar. The Pythagoreans generalized their discovery of ratios in music into a view of the whole universe itself as a musical scale and number. This theory is the source of the famous idea of the music of the spheres, according to which the moon, sun, and planets and stars were believed to produce different musical notes as they spin through space. Really? So one of the things that I'm doing is it's the same every time. The dogma and the dogma always predates the so-called discovery. Why is it that these things are not just discovered and that it's always some highly, highly religious people who desperately want it to be true, who just happen to discover what they prophesied? What a coincidence that it's like that every single time. A great deal of Pythagorean attention was in fact directed to astronomy in attempts to calculate the relative distances and sizes of the heavenly bodies and to provide accounts of both lunar and solar eclipses. Geometry, the science of solid numbers, was also a central part of their work. The proof that bears their name, the Pythagorean Theorem, the square of the hypotenuse of a right triangle equals the sum of the squares of the other two sides, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, seemed to date from the late 4th century BCE. Its truth, in fact, an old one known to the ancient Babylonians as many as 500 years earlier. Mathematics was promoted in the Renaissance by the rediscovery of the works of ancient mathematicians and the influence of Plato, who had emphasized the importance of mathematics in explaining the universe. Renaissance magic was the preserve of an old intellectual elite from all over Europe. Hermetic magic had become fused with alchemical thought into a single intellectual framework. Humans, who it was believed also had that spark of divinity within, could use magic, especially math. Oh man, dude. Oh shit. Oh man, it's been a few months since I've read this. To be honest, since I've read this page. Sorry, my bad. Mathematical magic. It says it right the fuck there. All right. Yeah, my language and stuff is gonna be all. I haven't done no video in like 6 months at least, so I'm gonna be rough around the edges and all that. It is what it is. All right, let me try to get through this. Humans who it was believed to have had the spark of divinity within could use magic, especially mathematical magic, to understand and dominate the world of nature, or to employ the powers of nature for beneficial purposes. It was likely that Hermeticism inaugurated the shift in consciousness that made the scientific revolution possible. What else do I need to say about that? Other than just quote it. You cannot separate these highly religious people from the globe. I'm done with people trying to tell me that, oh, it's just this secular thing and this I don't know if secular exists, but if it does, you ain't it. The study of numbers and ratios were yet another aspect of Hermetic study. By the way, just a quick side note, you realize that the seventh Hermetic principle is polarity of a spectrum of gender? And you realize that if we live in a society ran by people who push the seven Hermetic principles, that you're never going to escape this transhumanist, transgender propaganda? So that's just a side note. Just came to mind. The study of numbers and ratios were yet another aspect of Hermetic study. Just as letters and combinations of letters were seen to have mystical powers, so too did numbers. The study of numbers made an impact upon many other areas of scientific study, such as astronomy and mathematics, as well as areas that would not be considered scientific by modern definitions, such as astrology and numerology. So hold up. The study of numbers made an impact on many other areas of. So basically, all of this is pseudoscience. It might as well say, such as astronomy and mathematics and other pseudosciences. It might as well say that, but it doesn't. So let me not put words in their mouth. Let me keep going. Hermeticism continued to be very popular and influenced many of the great scientific minds of the Renaissance and early modern periods, among them Copernicus, Robert Boyle, and Sir Isaac Newton. So there's no religion attached to this, right? This is a secular movement, right? So I'm gonna have to talk over this. I think most people have seen this by now. I just distinctly remember watching this when I was a little kid. It went over my head, obviously. See the pentagram again. I'm only talking over it so that they don't hit me with the strike or whatever. We got octaves, etc. Let's get to where it talks about these eggheads in a fraternity. Fraternity? There's no such thing, you conspiracy theorist. Secret? No one does anything in secret. Members? A secret emblem? A pentagram? There's no such thing as secrets. There's no such thing as pentagrams. There's no such thing as fraternities. There's no such thing as oaths. So is Donald Duck a conspiracy theorist? Geometry, which the letter G in most lodges is said to signify, means measurement of land or the earth. science of numbers to which Pythagoras attached so much importance, and whose mysteries are found everywhere in the ancient religions, and most of all in the Kabbalah. They're telling you themselves, oh, you're just randomly claiming things about people. Dude, they're telling you. It's not a secret. These people are Kabbalists. Get over it. In the Grecian Mysteries, as established by Pythagoras, there were 3 degrees. Plato developed and spiritualized the philosophy of Pythagoras. Pythagoras learned from Zarathustra, a magus, whatever you want to call it, of Babylon. And obviously, it's called morals and dogma for a reason, because they're morals and dogma. Does that sound secular to you? Does the word dogma sound secular to you? Yikes. Pythagoras, the great divulger of philosophy of numbers, visited all the sanctuaries of the world. He went into Judea, where he procured himself to be circumcised. Really? Was he a Christian? He went into Judea, obviously it was before that time, but where he procured himself to be circumcised, that he might be admitted to the secrets of the Kabbalah, which the prophets Ezekiel and Daniel, not without some reservations, communicated to him. Then, not with some difficulty, he succeeded in being admitted to the Egyptian initiation upon the recommendation of King Amasis. All right, so the Holy Kabbalah, or tradition of the children of Seth, was carried from Chaldea by Abraham, taught to the Egyptian priesthood by Joseph, recovered and purified by Moses, concealed under the symbols of the Bible, and revealed by the Savior to St. John. Okay, so these people are highly, highly religious. And when I was talking about Cainites, they're saying right here, the tradition of the children of Seth. They're trying to tell you that this is an unbroken chain coming from the children of Seth. So you really, I know a lot of people have gotten hyper paranoid, specifically religious people, Christians and things like that. Can you blame them? They're claiming that they have an unbroken chain from the children of Seth. Okay, so the cradle of Gnosticism is probably to be looked for in Syria and even in Palestine. Most of its expounders wrote in that corrupted form of the Greek used by the Hellenistic Jews, and in the Septuagint in the New Testament, there's a striking analogy between their doctrines and those of the Judeo-Egyptian. You don't say. I like that word. Judeo-Egyptian. That makes infinitely more sense than Judeo-Christian. Judeo-Egyptian actually makes sense. Anyway, Philo of Alexandria, itself the seat of 3 schools. At once philosophic and religious, the Greek, the Egyptian, and the Jewish. Pythagoras and Plato, the most mystical of the Grecian philosophers, the latter heir to the doctrines of the former, and who had traveled the latter in Egypt and in the former in Phoenicia, India, and Persia, also taught the esoteric doctrine and the distinction between the initiated and the profane. The dominant doctrines of Platonism were found in Gnosticism. You guys just aren't going to do it. You're not going to separate religion from this globe lie. You're not going to do it. Okay? Let's get some more information from the horse's mouth. And before you go there, obviously, Manly P. Hall and Albert Pike are very high up on the chain of Freemasonic literature. So before you even go there, stop it. The child was born at Sidon in Phoenicia. Monarchus and Pythagoras named the child Pythagoras, for they believed that he had been predestined by the oracle. Some maintain that he was no mortal man, that he was one of the gods who had taken a human body to enable him to come into the world and instruct the human race. Pythagoras was one of the many sages and saviors of antiquity for whom an immaculate conception is asserted. Obviously, that sounds familiar. Pythagoras was known by the same title as Jesus, namely the Son of God, and was supposed by the multitude to be under the influence of divine inspiration. So, this isn't religious? Really? This is where it gets deep. I need to get close to the microphone. Here we go. A careful consideration. So, this is where it gets deep, y'all. A careful consideration of the writings of the great occultist and a study of their diagrams reveal the fact that many of them were acquainted with another method of arranging the heavenly bodies. The other system of astrological philosophy is called the heliocentric. This resulted in two distinct schools of philosophy, one geocentric and exoteric, the other heliocentric and esoteric. While the ignorant multitudes worshipped the house of the sun's reflection, which in the case described would be the bull, the wise revered the house of the sun's actual dwelling, which would be the scorpion or the serpent, the symbol of the concealed spiritual mystery. Okay. Go ahead and try to separate dogma and religion from this globe lie. Go ahead. In my opinion, they reversed the occult. When you are seeking occult power, the whole idea is to create a chasm between the people who know and the people who don't know. So the people who are in the know have the power. So a way to increase that power is to make sure that the people who are not in the know even less and are even more disconnected from reality. So that's where this globe lie comes in, because there's nothing new under the sun. There's only so much bullshit you can come up with. So what has happened is the occult has found a way to dumb down the public to create that chasm between the esoteric and the exoteric. This is the only way it could have been done as far as these points in time and progression. He traveled among the Jews and was instructed by the rabbis concerning the secret traditions of Moses, the lawgiver of Israel. Pythagoras was initiated into the Egyptian, Babylonian, and Chaldean mysteries. Okay, here we go. He went into Egypt and after many rebuffs and refusals, finally succeeded in securing initiation into the mysteries of Isis at the hands of the priest of Thebes. Then this intrepid joiner wended his way into the Phoenicia and Syria, where the mysteries of Adonis were conferred upon him, and crossing to the valley of the Euphrates, he tarried long enough to become versed in the secret lore of the Chaldeans, who still dwelt in the vicinity of Babylon. Finally, he made his greatest and most historic venture through Media and Persia into Hindustan, where he remained several years as a pupil and initiate of the learned Brahmins of Elephanta and Ellora. What a bunch of fucking bullshit. See, that's what I'm saying. I haven't done a video in hell long, so you already know my language is not going to be there. I was trying to get better with my language, but my practice is not there. However, does this make sense to you? Does it make sense to you that the lore of the guy who created this cult did all of this? Or is this a whole cult of people doing actions and funneling it into the lore of the story of one man? That's, in my opinion, that makes way more sense. And in my opinion, that's what's done with a lot of these things. Socrates, all of them. I think it's an entire cult of people, an entire panel, if you will, that are channeling it into the idea of an archetype. I don't think these people existed. That's just my opinion. Pythagoras' teachings are of the most transcendental importance to Masons. The philosophical school of Pythagoras was, in measure, also a series of initiations, for he caused his pupils to pass through a series of degrees and never permitted them personal contact with himself until they reached the higher degrees. Get past the Blue Lodge, boy, before I even talk to your ass. The pupils of the Pythagorean school were divided into exotericy, or pupils of the outer grades, and esotericy after they had passed the third degree of initiation and were entitled to the secret wisdom. Pythagoras regarded the planets as magnificent deities worthy of the adoration and respect of man. Okay, so when people like us, I say us, I don't know who the hell's watching this, but when people like me say exoteric, esoteric, and try to explain that, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist, does this look like a conspiracy theory? The Pythagoreans held that each star was a world having its own atmosphere. Oh, man. We're over here arguing with like a 16-year-old about the Earth having an atmosphere. These dogmatic psychopaths were claiming that each star was a world having its own atmosphere all these years ago, with an immense extent surrounding it of ether. That's a whole nother thing where they brought the ether was esoteric. Again, another leeway into understanding the whole picture of what's happening here. Okay, being visible in the sky at sunset, it was called Vesper, and as it arose before the sun, it was called the false light, the star of the morning, or Lucifer, which means the light bearer. Because of this relation to the sun, the planet was also referred to as Venus, Astarte, Aphrodite, Isis, and the mother of the gods. The most solemn oath they can take is called cosmos. The disciples of the Pythagoras also highly revered the planet Venus because it's the only planet bright enough to cast a shadow. As the morning star, Venus is visible before sunrise, and as the evening star, it shines forth immediately after sunset. From the first triangle came forth the seven spirits, symbolized by the triangle and the square. These together form the Masonic apron. The great Pythagorean truth that all things in nature are regenerated through the decad or 10 is subtly preserved in Freemasonry, through these grips being effected by the uniting of the 10 fingers, 5 on the hand of each person. I do have some red flag warnings in here because I do find it very spurious and just out there when they're claiming that these people existed. But anyway, Euclid. Of Euclid's life, nothing is known except for what the Greek philosopher Proclus reports in his summary of famous Greek mathematicians. So this guy's just mentioned one time in a summary somewhere, and that's all you have? And I'm supposed to believe everything that you have asserted that this man has said. Anyway, editors often confuse them with the philosopher Euclides of Megara, a contemporary of Plato, about a century before, and then they called him, and therefore called him Megarensis. So these people don't even know what the fuck they're talking about, in other words. The latest compiler before Euclid was Theudius, whose textbook was used in the academy and was probably the one used by Aristotle. For his subject matter, Euclid doubtless drew upon doubtless. How can you be doubtless? You have no idea. Anyway, for his subject matter, Euclid doubtless drew upon all his predecessors, but it is clear that the whole design of his work was his own, culminating in the construction of the 5 regular solids now known as Platonic solids. And you see the esoteric, not to be named, dodecahedron. 5 unproved assumptions that Euclid called postulates, now known as axioms, and 5 further unproved assumptions that he called common notions. Book 1 then proves elementary theorems about triangles and parallelograms. It's an awesome word. And ends with the Pythagorean Theorem. Book 2 contains a construction of the section, the division of a line into 2 parts such that the ratio of the larger and the smaller segment is equal to the ratio of the original line to the larger segment. Well, duh. The unevenness of the several books and varied mathematical levels may give the impression that Euclid was but an editor of treatises written by other mathematicians. Who knows? It could be anything, right? To some extent, this is certainly true, although it is probably impossible to figure out which parts are his own and which were adaptations from his predecessors. So you literally do not know, is all you had to say. Among Euclid's extant works are the Optics, the first Greek treatise on perspective in the phenomena, an introduction to mathematical astronomy. Yay. Those works are part of a corpus known as the Little Astronomy that includes the Moving Sphere by Autoclus of Pitane. Damn, that was hard to read. It is sometimes said that other than the Bible, the Elements is the most translated, published, and studied of all the books produced in the Western world. Euclid may not have been a first-class mathematician. Dude, Euclid might not have existed. Euclid may not have been a first-class mathematician, but he set a standard for deductive reasoning and geometric instruction that persisted, practically unchanged. Dude, that was you? Set a standard for deductive reasoning and geometric instruction. Man. I'm not going to get into this. So, in general, I'm not going to get into the proofs of the globe being a lie and all that, debunking the globe and the science of it, because there's people a lot more equipped with their skill set and experience and intelligence to do that than me. That doesn't mean I can't. It's just not my wheelhouse. So I might briefly show like the Black Swan stuff for a second, just for context. But this is not a scientific video. This is not a natural law video. None of that. This is my wheelhouse. I'm sticking to the occult because that's where power comes from. So when I was younger, I wanted to learn where power came from. Later on, I ended up on these topics because that's where power comes from. I didn't know that at the time, but it is what it is. Okay. Democritus. So this is how to square your square. So they talk about squaring the lodge. This is something that I'll go into later because they do the squaring the lodge ceremony where they actually do a ritual where they mimic the sun's path, circular path by way of the south around the altar. But I'll get into that later. Democritus asserted and also it's not like these people are just all in agreement, right? So some of these people are trying to vie for the most powerful propaganda they're going to push on people. So they're not always in agreement. So some people are geocentric, and some people are heliocentric. Some people are like in between, combinations of both. So Democritus. So this is the dude where you have this is like basically the origins of atheism. You've got Democritus asserted that a space, or the void, had to be in equal right with reality or being to be considered existent. He conceived of the void as a vacuum, an infinite space in which moved an infinite number of atoms that made up being, quote unquote, i.e., the physical world. Atomon, or indivisible. So he's the one that coined the term atom, which means indivisible. He explained the origin of the universe as follows. The original motion of the atoms was in all directions. It was a sort of vibration. Hence, there resulted collisions, and in particular, a whirling movement whereby similar atoms were brought together and united to form larger bodies and worlds. This happened not as a result. He's talking so matter of factly. This is so absurd. This happened not as the result of any purpose or design, but rather merely as a result of necessity. So he just knows, I guess. So explain to me how you can separate this from the philosophy of evolution. Go ahead and separate that for me. The work of Democritus has survived only in second-hand reports, sometimes unreliable or conflicting. Much of the best evidence is that reported by Aristotle. Aristotle wrote a monograph on Democritus, of which only a few passages quoted in other sources have survived. Democritus seems to have taken over and systematized the views of Leucippus, of whom little is known. So he might have just stole somebody else's stuff, and we don't even know who the hell that other guy is either. There is more uncertainty concerning the authenticity of the reports of Democritus' ethical sayings. Two collections of sayings are recorded in the 5th century anthology of Stobaeus, one ascribed to Democritus and another ascribed to an otherwise unknown philosopher, Democritus. Oh, man. That was like a Super Saiyan version of Socrates. I'm just playing. That's funny shit. Plato, Aristotle studied Pythagoras. Plato's beliefs were based on the ancient mysteries handed down from Pythagoras and wrote the Republic, which just so happens to be a template for the Communist Manifesto, and also what they're doing currently with eugenics and many other things. But anyway, belief in a 3-level hierarchy: philosopher kings, auxiliaries, and workers. Individuals incapable of running their own life. They're not half wrong about that shit. I can't engage in that though, because then I'll go down that path. But they're not half wrong. Suggest children be removed and run by the state. So they're talking about creating a system where you're raising someone else's kid. So it's the information, it's the state that raises them wisdom-wise. Secretly kill the weak, eugenics, right? Procreation allowed for 10 years, then stop. If you're caught, you are disbanded from family and are encouraged to issue a beating if you show up to a birthday. So if you show up to your kid's birthday that you love because you gave birth to this kid, they're going to beat your ass. Plato traveled widely and was initiated by the Egyptians in the profundities of Hermetic philosophy. He also derived much of the doctrines from Pythagoreans. You don't say. It's almost as if this cult has persisted. Plato's Academy, founded in the 380s, was the ultimate ancestor of the modern university. For 20 years, Aristotle was also a member of the Academy. He started his own school, the Lyceum, only after Plato's death, when he was passed over as Plato's successor at the Academy. There's the Academy. Each of Plato's dialogues have been transmitted substantially as he left it. However, it is important to be aware of the causal chain that connects modern readers to Greek authors of Plato's time. To survive until the era of printing, an ancient author's words had to be copied by hand, and the copies had to be copied, and so on over the course of centuries, by which time the original would have long perished. The copying process inevitably resulted in some corruption. Aristotle. So I think I should wrap it up after Aristotle. I got to see how I can stop this recording. I'm using a new recording software from Vimeo or something. So I got to see how to stop that. But Aristotle of Stagira was a Greek philosopher who pioneered systematic scientific examination in literally every area of human knowledge, and was known in his time as the man who knew everything, and later simply as the philosopher. He is traditionally linked in sequence with Socrates and Plato in the triad of the 3 greatest Greek philosophers. He was hired by Philip II, king of Macedon, as a tutor for his son Alexander the Great, and made such an impression on the youth that Alexander carried Aristotle's works with him on campaigns and introduced his philosophy to the East, where he conquered the Persian Empire. Aristotle, who held a low opinion of non-Greek barbarians, generally and Persians specifically encouraged Alexander's conquest of their empire. So Aristotle's like, don't give them pamphlets, bro. Wipe them out. Oh man, good times. When he was 18, Aristotle was sent to Athens to study at Plato's academy, where he remained for 20 years. Aristotle studied under Plato. The student and teacher disagreed on a fundamental aspect of Plato's philosophy, the insistence on a higher realm of forms, which made objective reality possible on the earthly plane. So basically, Aristotle's saying, no, this is a big machine that we can reverse engineer and find an original cause for. That Aristotle's rejecting the idea that the immaterial creates the material. Aristotle could never accept Plato's theory of forms, nor did he believe in positing the unseen as an explanation for the observable world when no one could work from what one could see backwards towards a first cause. So basically what I just said. Aristotle's writings fall into two groups. Those that were published by him but are now almost entirely lost, and those that were not intended for publication but were collected and preserved by others. The first group consists mainly of popular works. The second group comprises treatises that Aristotle used in his teaching. There is no certainty about their chronological order, and indeed it is probable that the main treatises on physics, metaphysics, psychology, ethics, and politics were constantly rewritten and updated. Another youthful work, the Percepticus, has been reconstructed by modern scholars from quotations and various works from late antiquity. So, in my opinion, this is one cult continuously updating this archetype's words. That's speculation. That's my speculation based on what I just presented. And then Aristarchus. So, I'm going to end it right here for part one. I'm not sure when I will have some time to put together part two. Let me see if I can figure out even how to stop this recording. But until next time in part two, I'll see you guys next time. And thank you for checking out my presentation.